Welcome everybody to Junk Food Vegetarian. I'm Alex and I'm here today with my partner, Christy. Today we're going to talk about a vegetarian Brazilian style hot dog. So I never encountered one of these until I had met my partner here. And to me it's a strange concept because the ingredients are pretty different from what you would consider an American or traditional hot dog to be. So let me kick it over to you to get that Brazilian perspective for what goes into this Brazilian hot dog.
Yeah, so this is different than how you typically make hot dogs in the US, but it's the way that I grew up. Brazilians eat hot dogs in a lot of ways, but this is like a traditional way that I ate a lot growing up. It's very common, for instance, at kids' birthday parties. If you have a large gathering, it's a kind of easy meal that you can make. It's very satisfying and I personally think is delicious. So it's my favorite way to eat hot dogs and I'm happy to be able to share it with all of you and with you.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and kick this off with the elephant in the room. Let's talk about the main difference here. So what are these buns and how do these work? These are drastically different than what maybe we're used to.
Yeah, so these are traditional kind of breads that are made in Brazil. So one difference is that in Brazil, it's very common to have bakeries, like local bakeries, and a lot of people go and get their bread fresh. And this bread we call it French bread.
Was it Pão Frances?
Pão Frances, yeah.
That, yes.
Pão Frances, and it's... but it is not in any way French. I've heard from Brazilians who live in France who have actually never been able to find this bread in France. So it's actually a Brazilian bread that is called a French bread in Brazil. And the main characteristic of it, I guess, is that on the outside it's kind of a bit tough, like it's kind of got a harder outside. It's not like super hard, but and then the inside is very soft. So I'm going to break one apart, and the inside is very soft. So these are actually a couple days old. We get them from a local Brazilian store here in the area, which prepares them fresh. They're great. These are a couple days old, but nonetheless, they're still really good. They're still soft. You keep them in this plastic bag sealed, and they stay soft. You can also freeze them. We can put them in the oven and reheat them. But basically, this bread is kind of the first big difference in how you eat Brazilian hot dogs.
So I see you've ripped this bread in half. So I guess I shouldn't say normal. A hot dog that I'm used to would come in one of those typical hot dog buns that are sliced down the middle that you set in here. So why have you ripped this one in half? How does that kind of work?
Well, so maybe you'll see in the end why I haven't just totally ruined this bun for our future use, because this is a way that you can eat it. So I guess here, let me put this. So the other main distinction between, I guess, like American style hot dogs and this type of Brazilian style hot dogs that I'm going to show you how to make is that these hot dogs are in a sauce. So there's two major components to the ingredients. One is the sauce ingredients. So I'll show you all of those, but basically you're going to need hot dogs and an onion. I'll probably only use half of this one because it's a very large onion, some garlic, and then something to make a tomato sauce. So you can use tomato paste and water it down. What I like to do is to use diced tomatoes and then crush them up in a food processor and cook them from there. You can also use fresh tomatoes and cook them down, or canned tomatoes and cook them down. I think that takes a little long, so I prefer to just make it into a sauce, pulverize it into a sauce and cook it from there. So those are the ingredients for the sauce, and then I also like to add some cilantro and some fresh parsley that I have today. And then we also add corn to the sauce itself. The second component of the Brazilian style hot dogs is the toppings that you put in your sandwich. So that includes, I'm going to separate some of this corn out. So I'm going to have corn also included as a topping. I like corn in my hot dogs. a topping I like to have. I'm also going to have pickles diced up. Cheese, so you don't have to have cheese. If you want to make this like a vegan style, you can do that by not adding cheese. But I like cheese. I like mayonnaise, which Alex does not. So I will have mayonnaise with mine. But
real quick with the pickles, we've got bread and butter spears here. Is there a different type of pickles that you all would use in Brazil, or is it just like any kind of pickles is game, or is it a salty type or a sweet type? I
would say you could use any pickles you like. The pickles that I would probably have had with hot dogs in Brazil would be like basic dill pickles. I never ate bread and butter pickles until I moved to the US, but I do like them a lot, and so that's what I'm including today. That's something else with the toppings. You can add a lot of different toppings. Actually, in a lot of kids' birthday parties or things like that, you might have no toppings at all. You might just have the sauce and the bread, and that's kind of sufficient. But the toppings are an added touch, and if you want like a nicer meal, you would have additional toppings. So I like the toppings a lot. That's also another difference. Like even for instance, like a vendor in Brazil that you buy a hot dog from, a street hot dog, they won't necessarily have the sauce. They'll just have like a hot dog with a bun, but the bun is like much bigger than what you usually get from hot dogs here in the US. And then they add all these toppings. So they'll add corn and perhaps pickles and cheese and just a whole bunch of stuff like put on top. So you get like this really big, great street hot dog. And I have not encountered that anywhere that I've had hot dogs in the US. So if there's somewhere that does that, let me know, because I would love that, especially if they have veggie ones, because otherwise I won't be able to eat them. But I haven't even encountered it with regular.
So speaking of toppings, what are these for? Potato sticks.
Yes, exactly. This is the topping that I would say is probably, of all the toppings, this is the most different topping that we use, that I haven't seen for sure. And this, like I said, on a street hot dog or at a party, this is a staple. You need to have this as a topping. They're potato sticks. So basically, once we add all of our toppings, one of the toppings will be potato sticks. One of the toppings will be potato sticks, and it really makes the hot dogs.
Yeah, it does. It really adds like a texture component too, I think. Like
yes.
It really kind of like any of that mushiness that you may have from having a bunch of condiments and stuff and have a bunch of toppings, you then kind of smooth out with the potato sticks.
Yeah, you have a crunch. And one thing I'll say is like you can add any additional toppings you like. Like Alex likes to add jalapenos to his. You can do that. I'm going with kind of like the more basic toppings, the one I like. If you want to add lettuce and stuff. I mean, it does get pretty full pretty fast though. So you'll see once we prep it.
So what vegetarian hot dogs are we using today? I see we've got a blend here. We've got a vegan option and a vegetarian option, I believe.
Yes. So we have two different kinds of veggie hot dogs here. One is the Morningstar Farms hot dogs. And these ones actually are not vegan. They contain wheat, egg, and milk ingredients. So that's what it says on the box. So I assume that they're not vegan. I'm not vegan, I'm a vegetarian though.
Same here as well.
I'm also using LightLife. I actually prefer the LightLife hot dogs, and from my reading of the ingredients, they do seem to be vegan. But read them for yourself. Oh, it does. It actually says certified vegan on them. So the LightLife ones are vegan, and I actually have a strong preference for the LightLife hot dogs. I just have already used quite a few of them, so I'm going to use some of the Morningstar ones as well. The Morningstar ones are still good, but I'm a more recent vegetarian, and I think the LightLife hot dogs are a bit more meat-like than the Morningstar ones.
All right, awesome. I think that's all the ingredients we have. Do we want to start prepping and get to cooking?
Yep, sounds good.
All right.
So I just preparing the hot dogs according to the specifications on the package. So I boiled a pot of water and just gonna sit them in there for a certain number of minutes. So just prepare them according to the instructions on the package, whichever you have. And then I'm going to pull them out as soon as they're done. Probably run them under some cold water to cool them off. And then I'm going to cut them into slices, and I'll show you what that looks like here in a second.
All right, so as we get into the prep, what do we do here at this stage?
Okay, so I've cut up the hot dogs. You can kind of see they're not very thick. You can cut them more thickly if you would like than what I've done here. but basically you don't have to cut them all that thick. I prefer them a bit thinner because they fit in the bread better. So this is my preference for how to cut them.
So yeah, with this end state, like how it's going to be is it's going to be like that bun right there, and it's going to be hollowed out, and all of the sauce and the hot dogs are going to be inside of it.
Yes, exactly. So you're going to have a sauce with hot dogs, and you're going to put that into the bread, and we'll show you that as well. Basically now I'm just going to warm up my pan. I've rinsed this out and dried it, and I'm going to add in about maybe like 2 tablespoons. I kind of just eyeball it, of olive oil, and I'm going to warm that up.
Now, do you have to use olive oil, or can you use butter, or does it really matter, or is like olive oil just the traditional way that it's been done?
I use olive oil because I like olive oil. I would prefer
best reason too, right?
Yeah, like I wouldn't recommend butter because you're going to be making a sauce with it afterwards. So I would recommend either olive oil or some other cooking oil. You could try butter.
Okay.
I haven't used that personally.
All right, so what's next?
So I'm going to let the oil warm up, and then I'm going to add in the onions. So I have a cup of onions, and then I have 2 cloves of garlic. So a bit of a smaller one. So I'm going to be adding those in as well once the oil warms up just slightly. I'm also going to add in this seasoning, complete seasoning, sazon completa. What's in it? Dehydrated vegetables, garlic and onion, salt, MSG, which is always a good additive in my opinion because it's delicious, and herbs and spices, other herbs and spices. So you can add, you don't need to use this exact thing. This is my go-to kind of mix. If you would like, you can just add things like pepper, salt, garlic powder, although we are adding garlic itself, and just kind of season to taste for whatever your taste is for a sauce. We're adding in fresh parsley and fresh cilantro as well. You can also add dehydrated versions of those, or you don't need to add them at all if you would prefer. But I highly recommend the seasoning. It's one of my favorites, and so that's what I'm going to be using. Okay. Oh, there's my oil is fairly hot.
So that's the onions going in there, right? And then you're gonna press the garlic over it.
Yeah, and I think I might press one at a time because it was hard. I'm gonna press the garlic over, just using my handy garlic press.
That's pretty. I'm not gonna lie, I've never used a garlic press before.
Really? So. Okay, squeeze.
Yeah, it gets all up in there, doesn't it?
That's okay. All right, that's good. You just put that in the sink. I don't need that anymore.
See, I'm kind of an animal, you know. I prefer to get all of my garlic pre-minced, and I've never.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you can get them in the little containers.
Yes.
But I think for the fresher taste, this is probably the better way to go.
I always prefer to have fresh, but pre-minced is like very helpful for cooking in generally, or the minced garlic. So I'm gonna cook these until they're like a bit, just until I can kind of smell the garlic in the air, and then I'll add in the hot dogs and kind of cook them all together. And
so they don't need to brown or anything. They just like gonna let it.
I'm gonna let them brown before I put in the sauce, but I'll probably put the hot dogs in a little bit before they brown, so the hot dogs can also get some of the flavor.
Okay.
So maybe when they're like a tiny bit golden, I'll add in the hot dogs.
Golden and delicious.
And I'm cooking on like a medium-high heat.
Full burner, medium high.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is very interesting difference between how you see American hot dogs made and how this Brazilian style hot dog is being made. The first thing that struck me, of course, is the cutting up of the hot dogs. But when you're really kind of mixing it with that sauce, that makes a lot of sense compared to how we do it now, where we're just throwing in that giant log of a hot dog and going to town with it. So it kind of lets you get that full hot dog perspective. So
I'm gonna add in some of this as well now. I'm probably adding about 2 tablespoons. I kind of just can see it, kind of covered it over, but So I don't actually always measure all of this, so, but I will, I'm trying to measure more today so I can give you an accurate depiction. But see, the onions have gotten like a little bit more yellow now, or translucent, and then I'm adding in the hot dogs. So I'll let that cook a tiny bit. I'm gonna add a little more, maybe another maybe another teaspoon, I don't know.
So
kind of just add spices to taste, I guess.
Just to kind of learn and feel it out, get that perfect personalized taste going.
Yeah. So here I have about so I had a full cup of onions and 2 garlic cloves. I'm adding in 1/4 a cup of cilantro and 1/4 a cup of parsley, fresh parsley, and they're like cut pretty fine.
And you mixed them all together just for?
I just added them both to the same plate. So I first diced them all, and then I measured them, and then I just put them both on 2 sides of the same plate.
Right.
But yeah, so I'm just gonna toss them in here.
And how long should they cook in this state before you put the sauce in, you think?
So I'm probably gonna turn the fire down a little bit right now to about a medium, and then I'm just gonna let the onions maybe cook a little more, and maybe try to get a little bit of browning on the hot dogs.
All right.
And then I'll probably already add in the sauce.
So, while we're doing this, let's go ahead and get into our famous debate. Christy and I have been going back and forth. I thought, this is a good meal. Maybe if you would like to uptick it, in my opinion, you could add an Italian sausage or something like a bratwurst.
No.
And she has flat out told me, no, that is antithetical to the creation of the Brazilian hot dog.
I just don't think, I don't know if it's antithetical to the creation of the Brazilian hot dog, but this is a hot dog dish to me. It's not something with sausage in it or bratwurst. I guess to me this is hot dogs. So like I don't know, it's hard to explain, because what I want to say is it would be like you just taking a hot dog, and instead of having a hot dog, having a sausage. But that makes sense.
Yeah, that happens.
Within the American hot dog way of eating hot dogs. But to me, I don't know. I really like this meal as a hot dog meal, and I think that putting something else like a sausage in it, it would be a different thing. It wouldn't be the same thing.
I can kind of see what you're saying, because when you look at the size of the actual hot dogs here, it's much, much smaller. It's a little bit less of a circumference, whereas I imagine you would throw off the whole taste and proportions with a sausage or bratwurst. Maybe they're thicker, maybe
it would be it would also just be a very different taste. To me, this is kind of reminiscent again of being a kid and having your bit of junk food at the party. It's not it's not something fancy. I guess it's something kind of simple. So
yeah, it's an elegant meal, right? It's meant to be all inclusive. You're gonna eat that, you're gonna pick up your little hot dog bun there, and you're gonna bite into it, and you have everything you need. You have vegetables inside. You've got your sauce. Yeah, it's neat. When I found out about this, it kind of blew my mind. Obviously, I had to get over that it's slightly different than the American way, but I thought it was a pretty interesting take on it. Almost like the sandwich side of the argument winning finally in the hot dog versus hamburger. Are they sandwiches or not? It seems like this is the actual winning, as they get put into a pocket form.
Okay,
so how's this look?
I'm gonna grab the tomato sauce.
All right.
So like I said, I don't usually measure how much I use, so I'm going to measure it today. So basically this is just pureed diced tomatoes. I put them in a food processor. You could put them in a blender, or like I said, you could just actually take the diced tomatoes themselves and cook them down, or you could water down a paste and use that for your sauce. Basically what you're going for here is a kind of tomato sauce. So I'm just going to put this in here. So that's 1 cup. I think I'm probably going to go with either 2 or 3. So let's see.
What's the level of consistency you think we're going to go through here? It's not too soupy, right? But you're planning on also it kind of boils down a little bit, You think?
That's perfect. Yeah. So, so the level of consistency so I put in 2 cups of tomato sauce, and you can see kind of the ratio of hot dogs to tomato sauce. That might also impact how much sauce you want to use, how many hot dogs you want to use. But to me, this right here is pretty perfect. It's pretty saucy, as you can tell, but there's hot dogs in there. Yeah. So it is pretty saucy. It's not thick. It's not like a congealed sauce. It is really like a sauce. So I'm going to put this to boil. I'm going to add in some more of my sazon. And I'm going to stir it up and set this to boil. And you can see it's already coming to a boil pretty fast.
Tomato-based products always, right?
Yeah, and I'm going to just bring it to a boil, put a lid on it, and I'm going to turn it down a little bit and let it simmer. And this is really just to get the taste of the seasonings, taste of the onions and garlic into the sauce to make the sauce more flavorful. I'm not really trying to cook it down to make it thicker or anything like that. It will get a bit thicker, but that's not really the point here. So I used 2 cups of sauce, and that was about a can of diced tomatoes. And you could make it a little bit thicker or a little bit thinner depending on your personal preference. I also prefer to use the tomatoes originally. I think that gives the sauce a nice flavor, but you could also use tomato paste and just water it down. I like to taste as I go, so. It's great, but it does need to cook a little more. Okay, so just to give you a view, I've kind of brought it to a boil, and then I'm putting it on a simmer here to kind of cook a bit and get some of those flavors throughout the sauce. Okay, so our sauce has been simmering for about 5 minutes now, so I'm going to add in some corn. And you can add this in earlier, but it does tend to cook down a bit, so I prefer to add it in a little bit later. I'm adding in about half of this small can. This is a 8.75 ounce can. So I'm adding in about half of this. So I think it's nice to have quite a bit in there. And I've put about half of this small can, and the other half I'll reserve to kind of add in as a topping. Okay, so I've just pulled this off of the stove. You can see it's steaming hot. Hopefully it doesn't steam up my camera. And basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this and either, like I did before, tear it in half or just cut it in half. And I'm kind of gonna push the bread in. So you see it kind of creating a hole here where I can put in my sauce. And you can pull out the filling if you want and eat it, it's delicious. But I just kind of push mine in. And then I like mayonnaise, so I'm gonna go ahead and add in some mayo. You can also add ketchup and mustard after you're done to the sauce. It's really good. I usually don't, just because it can get a little wet and I just prefer not to have those, but it is common to add ketchup and mustard as well. So now I'm going to add in my sauce, and you can see I'm just going to take kind of a spoonful of it, including the sauce itself and some hot dogs, and I'm just going to put it in there. Now this is one thing you do have to be pretty careful with, is that it's very, very hot. So keep that in mind before you take a bite. But I'm now gonna just kind of push stuff out of the way, and I'm gonna add on my toppings. So I'm gonna add some onions and some cheese. I like to add the cheese in pretty soon because I kind of like the cheese to get all melted in there. I'm gonna add in my pickles, some more corn just for good measure, and then last but definitely not least, my potato chips. So I'm gonna add in a whole bunch of potato sticks and kind of just push everything down. You can see it's pretty full in there, and that's about it. So at sometimes birthday parties, you might just have this kind of sauce with bread, and you might just have a bowl full of breads, and people can just go by and serve themselves sauce in their bread. Or you might just have, I think more common is probably to have the sauce itself and potato chips, and that is good in and of itself. But I'm gonna take a bite of this now because it looks delicious. Okay, it's amazing.
All right, there we have it. Thank you so much for joining us today while we made this vegetarian Brazilian hot dog. So if you found the information today useful or you just liked it, make sure that you drop a like and you hit that subscribe button down there. All right, let's dig into this thing and try it out. Good.
Success?
Yeah.
If you if you do decide to make these and you put your own special spin on it, or if you have any trouble, or if you like it and want to come back and tell us so, please definitely leave a comment. That would be awesome. I would love to see whether people make this and if they like it.
Yeah, and what variations they come up with.
Yeah, that would be great.
All right, thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy your food.